Hello, and welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and the Poison Pen's guest author today is USA Today bestselling and award-winning Gigi Pandian. Did I get that correct?
Almost, Gigi
Okay.
Pandian.
Pandian. Thank you for correcting me. Whose latest mystery is Under Lock and Skeleton Key. Before we begin, I do want to let those tuning in to our program know that the Poison Pen does have copies of Under Lock and Skeleton Key, and that Gigi has provided us with a limited number of signed book plates and also recipe cards. So if you're interested in getting one of those exclusive items, feel free to give us a call at the bookstore or go online, and we will be happy to put a copy in the mail to you or hold one to pick up at the store. And now I would like to welcome virtually Gigi to the Poison Pen.
Thank you so much for this invitation, John. I'm looking forward to chatting this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. I loved your new book, Under Lock and Skeleton Key, but before we dive into that and talk about that, I always like to know about who a writer was before they started writing. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background?
So my background, I came to writing because I absolutely adore reading mysteries, and I have since I was a young child. And I'm an only child, and my parents were both cultural anthropology professors before retiring. And so I had the opportunity to go on lots of research trips with them when I was a kid, going to conferences and going on their research travels. And so since I was an only child and I had to make up entertainment for myself a lot of time because the adults I would be around, there were sometimes kids, but lots of time I was not interested in all of this adult talk going on. So I would read lots of mystery stories and started making up my own mystery stories as well from when I was really young. And so I learned how to entertain myself very young, both through throwing myself into reading mysteries. And it was always mysteries, even from a young age. My house was filled with books of all kinds, but it was always the mysteries that I gravitated towards. And then those were the stories that I started to write in terms of writing little mysteries myself. I think it was 5th grade that I wrote my first little mystery novel. So
now, was that like a Scooby-Doo knockoff or something?
The Scooby-Doo knockoffs were even younger. I didn't write a whole Scooby-Doo knockoff novel, but when I was really young and I wanted more than the TV shows and more than the books, my mom would tell me more stories, but I never liked the direction that her stories went. So I would make up my own Scooby-Doo adventure stories. I don't know if I wrote them down or if I just ended up telling her the bedtime stories instead of her telling me. We have no paper records. We couldn't find that one. The earliest paper record we could find after I became a writer was my mom found that 5th grade novel.
Now, you actually did have a different career path in mind before you started writing. You were more on the academic track. Is that correct?
Yeah, it never occurred to me because that was my whole world, seeing my parents and all of their friends that they did. It never occurred to me that I could have a creative career. And so I really just thought it was my fate to become an academic like them. And so much of that world really is wonderful. I love doing research. I loved that they got to have summers and do so much travel research, and they really cared about their research. And so much of that, and we always had a monthly graduate student gathering at my house as a kid. So they were very social in the academic community at their university. And so it seemed there was so much that seemed like it would be great. And so I did actually start a PhD program that I did for a couple of years, but my heart wasn't in it. I loved the research part, but I didn't want to be I didn't want to be doing my own original research that was confined to facts. I loved the idea of, it seemed like fictional academics have so much more fun than real life ones. And so I loved the idea of taking so many of the historical gems and things that I have, learned in terms of researching, but having the freedom to write fiction from that. And I love being able to have, I'm try to be careful whenever I do have real history that I then diverge. I'll write an author's note that will make it clear that most of this history is actually real history, but where it's fiction from there.
So it's kind of the Indiana Jones school of academic research.
Yes, yes, much more fun than real life.
So you decided you wanted to write, and I believe it was because of a competition that prompted you to actually get your first adult book finished.
Yeah, it was actually National Novel Writing Month, which I'm still a huge fan of. I have my NaNoWriMo mug that I have my coffee in because for anyone watching or listening who isn't familiar with National Novel Writing Month, it's the challenge to write a rough draft of a 50,000 word novel in 1 month in November. And it was just a small group of friends in the Bay Area who had challenged each other because they said, we've always wanted to write a novel one day, but there's never a good time to actually write a novel because life, so they challenged each other and it grew bigger and bigger every year. And so when I first heard about it, I had been writing for fun but never finishing anything. And so because writing was a hobby, I still didn't think it could ever transition into being a career. And so I used that NaNoWriMo challenge to finally finish the first novel that I was working on, to finally reach the end. And I was so excited that I had reached the end that I submitted it to the Malice Domestic Grants Competition, which is a grant to foster the next generation of traditional mystery writers. So like in the tradition of Agatha Christie. And I was so surprised to learn that I won their grant that year for my work in progress. And up until that time, I didn't know any mystery writers at all. I just loved to read their work, but they weren't real people in my mind. And so part of the grant is that they pay for you to attend Malice Domestic. And so I was scared because I didn't know anyone, but the mystery world is such a wonderful, welcoming community. And so as soon as I stepped into the convention, I really felt like I had found my kindred spirits. And that's what really gave me the passion to really turn this good idea for a book, and that they saw something in my work in progress that I then put in the work to figure out how to make that work in progress into something good.
And was this the book that eventually became Artifact?
Yes. Yeah. So Artifact was my first novel, and it had many different iterations, and I didn't just rewrite it, but I loved my characters and my idea for the mystery so much that I didn't want to have it as a drawer first novel, but I also knew that it was not good in that first iteration. And so I completely rewrote it from scratch as I learned how to write. And but I love that novel, and I still do to this day. And so I figured out how to actually turn it into what it should be.
And when I believe your agent was shopping it around, you got some feedback that your voice was cozy, but your book was not. So you were kind of already straddling that line.
Yeah. And my agent is so wonderful. I still have the same agent all these years later. She's been a wonderful champion for me all of these years because she didn't want to push me to writing something that I didn't want to write, even though she had so much of a challenge selling my books because publishers didn't really know where my books fit. And I wanted to write the books I wanted to write, and she really supported me in that. And so it's been a really winding journey to get here, but I'm so happy that I stuck with writing my quirky, don't quite fit mysteries, and that I had such support from her to keep doing that.
Speaking of quirky and don't quite fit, let's talk a little bit about your new book, Under Lock and Skeleton Key, because it does have many cozy qualities, but it also has your unique kind of quirky voice. What can you tell those listening in about the book?
So I think of Under Lock and Skeleton Key as a Gothic cozy mystery. And I think of it like that because a cozy mystery to me is the type of mystery that a reader knows that they're not going to get any gratuitous violence. It's not a gritty mystery. For me, I love that they are puzzle plot mysteries. Not all cozies are necessarily the puzzle that the reader could solve with all the clues there, but in the traditional style of mystery, I like that overlap there. But also that that the characters are people that you want to be hanging out with, that you would want to have as your friends. And so it is a cozy experience that you can have your cup of tea or coffee and curl up in a cozy window and read this book that you know will not have anything that's too frightening or that's too graphically violent that you can't keep out of your mind, but you still get this wonderful mystery. And so I love John Dixon Carr, and when I was younger, Scooby-Doo, and they do have a connection that is what I love that I've tried to bring into this book, which is the Gothic elements, that there is something that looks like it's a supernatural crime, that so Scooby-Doo, it looks like it's a ghost, and in John Dixon Carr, he created all these wonderful Gothic elements in his locked room fiction, so it looks like it is a curse, or that this family is being haunted, because in the locked room puzzle, it looks like there can only be a supernatural explanation. Yet for both, in our kids Scooby-Doo and then in our John Dixon Carr for adults, the ghost is unmasked at the end, and it really is proven to be a rational explanation, but you've gotten to go on this fun adventure to get to that rational explanation. And so I really tried to create that in Under Lock and Skeleton Key. There's a Gothic atmosphere in two key ways, that there is a family curse. Tempest Raj comes from a long line of stage magicians, and in the family, the eldest child dies by magic. And so something to do with stage magic that kills the eldest child for several generations. And so nobody really believes that it's actually a supernatural curse, but you have to wonder. And then when things start happening to Tempest, she really has to wonder. But then the other Gothic element is that the family business that Tempest moves home to after her stage magic career is sabotaged by her stage double and her career is ruined. So she's moved home to her childhood bedroom, working for the family business, Secret Staircase Construction. And they build magic into people's homes through creating things like sliding bookshelves, hidden staircases, secret gardens through grandfather clocks that are more than they seem. So all sorts of really cool architecture that has magic and misdirection in it. And the crime in the book is a locked room puzzle, because Tempest's stage double, who she's convinced wrecked her career, that trouble follows her home. And in the job of her first renovation project for her dad's business, her stage double is found dead inside a wall, but the wall has been sealed for a whole century. So it seems like it's impossible, and it has to be the family curse that has followed her there. And so I wanted to create enough spooky elements that you really do wonder. So you get kind of like the ghost story along with solving the puzzle pieces to reach the conclusion.
Yeah, it's really nicely done, because you do have that curse. You have Tempest kind of thinking that perhaps she's being haunted several times in the story, and yet you create enough willing suspension of disbelief on the part of the reader that they're kind of thinking, well, it might be supernatural, but maybe there's a rational explanation, what. So that's really nicely threaded throughout the story. Another thing that I think you really were very smart about is the idea of a protagonist who is a magician, because working in magic, being a magician, and writing mysteries, there's a lot of overlap. You're both working with misperception, misdirection.
Yeah, I love that I'm a big fan of stage magic, but I came to it through mystery fiction. Because of my love for classic mystery fiction, there is a tradition of writing stage magicians as sleuths in traditional mysteries, because there is that overlap, especially for impossible crimes, because magicians create misdirection, and it really is so much of the same thing, that mystery writers are doing if you're creating that sort of puzzle plot and having something that looks like a crime that looks like it's impossible. And I don't know if you can see, I have so many magic books there too. But the principles really are the same. So I can really nerd out on this stuff for ages. But I love that was something too that I didn't. Magicians are kind of like, some people like them, sometimes they don't, so if I had listened to external feedback about creating a character, I might not have gone all in to make her, to make magic such a central part of the book. But for me, it really was so central to Tempest's character and her family history, and in terms of the misdirection of the book, that I feel like writing is really, it's fun, but it's really difficult. And so is the business of publishing. So if I don't feel really passionately about what I'm writing, there are easier ways to have a career. But I love this one, but only if I'm able to really write the stories that I feel passionate about.
And you do, I think there is broad appeal to the traditional mystery reader or the cozy reader, because you have some of the elements that they're searching for. Instead of, though, a cat or dog, you have your own twist in Tempest's choice of pet.
Yes, her lop-eared rabbit, that as a magician, she never worked with rabbits in her show, but she was gifted a rabbit many years ago. And she didn't think that she was going to keep Abra, which is short for abracadabra. But he has such a wonderful personality. Abra is based on a rabbit that I had when I was a little kid who seriously chased cats out of our yard. He was he had the completely larger than life personality, a gray lop-eared rabbit. And so I based Tempest rabbit on my childhood pet, because rabbits were what I had. And that's, I loved that rabbit. And so I wanted to bring him back to life through Tempest getting to have her persnickety, curmudgeonly rabbit.
And then there's almost a whole subgenre of culinary cozies, and you put your own spin on that by bringing food in via primarily Tempest's grandfather, who kind of introduces readers to different dishes and cuisines.
Yeah, Tempest's grandfather is, he is part of the tradition of stage magic in her family background. So he grew up in a family of stage magicians in South India, where my dad is from. And he left when he was a teenager after a family tragedy, and left for Scotland to go to school. And he became a medical doctor there. That's where he met Tempest's grandmother at the University of Edinburgh. But after retiring from being a medical doctor, now that he lives with Tempest's family in Northern California, he loves to cook and feed people. And so because of his growing up in South India, living most of his life in Scotland, and now being in California, those are my culinary traditions that I love to cook. And I learned to cook from scratch about 10 years ago after I had a cancer diagnosis that left me with some food restrictions. But so I wanted to learn how to cook all the food I loved, but really in a way that could be both healthy and delicious, so I could take care of myself but still eat well. So I, through Grandpa Ash, he cooks a mashup of fusion food from India and Scotland and California cuisine all together, that's based on all of my recipe testing. And so it's one of those things that I don't think of it as, I'm happy if people think of it as a culinary mystery, but for me, it really just adds so much to the characters, because for him, food is love. And so he's always asking Tempest, have you eaten? And he loves to feed people and have people over. The kitchen in the tree house that he and Tempest's grandmother live in, the kitchen is the main room of the house. And so he's always cooking as an expression of caring for people. And his contribution to the family business, Secret Staircase Construction, is that he cooks lunches for the crew. So he'll cook lunches and then stay in shape by driving his bicycle around to deliver the lunches to the crew.
And it's done in the traditional South Indian way. And I can't remember the term, but they're like these stacking
Yeah, the Dabbawala. So yeah, from Mumbai. That yeah, I took that idea that he wanted to do that, having in the stainless steel tiffin so that you can have it stacked together and then be able to have it on your bike and, you know, go on public transportation too and get it safely to its destination. And Ash always brings extra cookies and things too, because the food smells really good. So if people ask about it, he's able to give them little treats as well.
And that kind of builds into his ability to help Tempest because he maintains this Rolodex of contacts.
Yes, he's the type of person that everywhere he goes, he makes new friends. And so that is his contribution to being able to help Tempest, because he knows everyone. So it's kind of one of those humorous things where he can, like, anything he can like pull out of his hat to pull out of that Rolodex to help.
Another thing that I loved about Under Lock and Skeleton Key is the way you kind of pay homage to traditional and classic mystery books, both from your love as a reader and as a way to introduce new readers to that. Ivy and Tempest talking about their favorite books, about movies and things like that. Was that a conscious decision that you wanted to do, or would that just kind of organically float into the plot?
So this kind of both, because I had a short story that I wrote, The Locked Room Library, that was published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. And The Locked Room Library is a locked room mystery story, as you may have guessed. And so for it, I created a fictional library in San Francisco that is devoted to classic mystery fiction, and especially the impossible crime genre. And so that I was writing that story concurrently when I was working on a draft of Under Lock and Skeleton Key. And I loved that setting of the Locked Room Library so much that I'm like, I think Secret Staircase Construction did the renovations of this Victorian house to build this. And I think, you know, that, yeah, so I figured out how to bring that setting into the story so that there could be a natural focal point of having it be natural that Tempest and her former best friend Ivy would be able to be talking about how the misdirection in these classic mysteries is so similar to what they're seeing now. And they did have, when they were young kids, they did have this shared passion for mysteries that they talk about a lot. But I hadn't really, until I wrote that short story, I hadn't realized just how central it would be. And I also, John Dixon Carr and a couple of authors have previously written locked room lectures, where they explain in a book what different ways that impossible crimes, broad categories for how it can be pulled off. And so people who love this type of mystery will debate this because there's all sorts of different ways to think about it. So I decided to give a shot at my own spin on a locked room lecture. And this is something why I'm so glad that I am in the mystery community and know other readers and writers who really enjoy impossible crime fiction, because I was able to show them a draft of that to make sure that I wasn't, because I wanted to both pay homage to my favorites and put my own spin on it, but I didn't want it to feel either false that I was doing it, and I also didn't want it to seem like I was ripping off what somebody else had done. And so I wanted to strike that balance of doing it in my own way and having it feel that it was done authentically, that this characters would actually have this conversation. And so from my readers who are really into the genre, I was really happy that I was able to pull that off.
You succeeded. It's really brilliantly done in the book.
Oh, thank you.
What I think is also nice is because you're telling readers about these books. I don't know whether it's just one of those serendipity things, but there's been a resurgence of interest in classic mysteries. Publishers are bringing them back into print, readers are discovering them. So you kind of are pointing them in the direction they can go. So that kind of is a nice secondary effect of the books.
Yeah, I've been I've been reading and writing in this subgenre for so many years with, not seeing other people interested in it, but I love it. So I've been like seeking out, trying to buy, used old copies of classics. So I'm so thrilled that it's now easier for both me to buy, because I haven't read all the classic mysteries by all means. And so for me to find ones that were previously out of print, and also for other people to fall in love with these books now that so many are being reprinted. So that's been really, really exciting to see. And also not just reprinted, but translated into English too. There's Paul Halter, a French author he's contemporary, but he's writing in that same tradition. So lots of his books are being translated into English and published by Lockroom International. And then there's lots of Japanese authors, both from about 75 years ago, and also present day Japanese authors who are now being translated into English and published. So I am devouring all of those Japanese Lockroom mysteries, as well as Paul Halter's Lockroom mysteries.
And I'll just pause here for a commercial message to let those tuning in know that the Poison Pen Press does have a line of classic mystery novels, including a couple titles by John Dixon Carr. So if you're interested in those, that's one way to access them in print.
And the covers are so gorgeous that even though I already have copies, I'm like, man, I need to buy the new ones too. So.
And they have those wonderful introductions too from different scholars.
Yeah. So the additional content.
It's nice to be able to access them again. Let's kind of pivot a bit and talk about your writing process, because the nature, especially of Under Lock and Skeleton Key, but probably your other mysteries, are such that I'm wondering whether you really have to know in advance all the different key elements, or whether you can just kind of do it organically and hope it all falls into place. But that would seem like a lot to depend on. How do you approach writing your mysteries?
I do both, because it is, in terms of the style I write, it is a lot to do, but I also love my characters so much that I have to be true to them once I start writing. So I am a very strict outliner, that I can't start writing until I have an outline that I think I know what's going to happen, that has all the major beats and twists in the story. And I'm really, know who the characters are, and I know what the twist solution is. So I can't start writing if I don't have that outline. But I realized a few books ago that I have never been right about the culprit in the end. And so because I listen to my characters, once I start writing, the mystery itself is the same, but the person who did it is not the same. And I love that I've learned through osmosis of just loving reading so many mysteries, that my subconscious, I think, is a lot smarter than my conscious brain, because when I reach that ending and realize that I was wrong about who did it, I've actually set things up in the story so that the new person who did it, it's actually pretty much set up. So that doesn't mean I don't have to go back and revise at all. I do, but I don't have to make huge changes at that point. I just need to make small shifts to make sure that works. But it really was the characters coming to life once I begin writing, that then I see how the puzzle actually applies to these characters as they're really interacting. Because I write on, well, I won't even say because of the type of mystery I write. I think all mysteries are stronger when they have really characters that seem like real people, and so that they're not one-dimensional, and how they end up interacting with each other. And writing dialogue and banter is one of my favorite things about writing, to really see how getting to know the characters through how they interact with other people. And so that, I think, is, if I try to force them to speak in a certain way, it doesn't work. And so I have to trust that process of the dialogue that comes out of me when I'm writing, and then that'll inform actually who is the person that would actually do this bad thing.
Let's see. You've been writing now for a while, and you have a lot of books under your writing belt. As you look back, what do you know now as a writer that you would tell yourself when you were first starting out that you wish you had known then?
One big thing is that writing and publishing is a marathon, not a sprint, that you shouldn't be in a rush if you're writing, and learning the craft and giving books the time they need. I feel like for a few years when things started happening with my writing, because for many years after I started taking it seriously, after I won that Malice Domestic grant, it took many more years for me to, before I was published. And then I ended up getting a couple book deals within a close amount of time. And I really felt like I had to say yes to everything. And so on the one hand, I'm glad I did, but I also worked really hard to make sure that I could get everything done in a short amount of time. And then only once so I'm glad I did that, but once I was a little bit more established, being able to appreciate how long it really does take me to write a really good book and to keep my mental health. And so I still work really hard, but not past the breaking point. And so like figuring out that, you don't have to say yes to everything, and giving yourself the time you need so that you're really proud of each book, but you can still work hard to deadline, but really figuring out, I need to work at a sustainable pace, basically. And so I'm still alternating between two different mystery series, but for me, that's how I really stay excited and fresh about each one, because I can be really excited about a draft, then hand it off to critique readers, give my mind a break, go back to whatever stage I'm at on a different project. And then with that distance that I've had from it, it's really exciting to come back to those characters and that story. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I'd forgotten that happened. And, but if I hadn't given it that distance, so it's just taken a while to figure out what my pace is, what's sustainable, but knowing that this is something you don't have to reach the finish line super quickly. It's fine. Take your time. This isn't something that you have to get it completely right at the start. Because if it is something that you want to do as a career, which I do, because I'm having so much fun with this.
I think that's very perceptive. I think especially recently, there's been this challenge for authors because there's, from publishers, from readers, there's this expectation that everyone writes at the same pace, that everyone can do 6 books a year or 3 books a year. And it's all a very individual thing.
Yeah. And I don't think it makes, however long it takes an author to write a book, I don't think that dictates the quality of the book,
Yeah.
But an author still has to figure out what their process is. And for me, I actually don't know how to say how long it takes me to write a book, because I can be thinking about a story for a long, long time before I ever sit down to write it. And so that's kind of that is part of the writing process, but it's not exactly doing the writing itself. And so different things take all sorts of different amounts of time.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, because I know that you're a reader, and I always love learning what authors have been reading that they want to share with others, and maybe what's on your summer reading list this year. Talk to us about you as a reader now.
Okay. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to mention a few things. I'm just going to see what I have on my shelf here. Okay. That I want to mention. Okay, I'm gonna pull out. These are all my new things that I have right here, latest book things. So Deanna Rayburn, I'm a huge fan of hers. So it was thrilling. I have a book blurb on the cover of Under Lock and Skeleton Key from her, which was a thrill for me because she's fantastic. So this is the latest Veronica Speedwell novel that just came out, which I'm very excited about. Mia Manansala's next, her second cozy mystery, which just came out. I'm very excited about that too. L. Cosimano's Finley Donovan series, book 2, also just out. And I could go, okay, I'm going to mention 2 more. Okay, 2 more books. So Kim Fay's Love and
that's
Saffron.
such a wonderful book. Oh.
Yes, yes. And so I just got my personalized signed copy. I just went to see her. She did a little book tour in California. So she's had many years since her previous book. So that one's exciting. And then I'm going to see if I have, yes. Okay. And then I was talking about Japanese locked room mysteries. Mm-hmm. So these Seishi Yokomizo, who writes the Detective Kindaichi mysteries, it's a long running series in Japan, but there's only, I think, 3 that are out now in English, and The Village of 8 Graves is the most recent one. I read this last month, and yeah, this series is great. So I'm eagerly awaiting more of them to be translated and published, but I could go on, but I think 5 books is probably enough of recommendations for now.
Well, I think that's terrific. I think what's interesting is that several of those of your choices kind of share your literary styles. They've got that sharp sense of humor to the writing, that kind of dry sense of wit. So I think that's interesting. They're speaking to you on that term. I do want to second Kim Fay's Love and Saffron. I know it sounds hyperbole, but it's a book that almost restored my faith in the world at a time when it's really difficult to deal with everything that's going on. It is such an amazing book. So if you need something it's not a mystery, but it's got beautiful characters, and it just, I was so pleased that you mentioned that. It's truly a great book. They're all great books.
Yeah. And so, okay, so I am going to ask you a question, because all of these books, I feel like not all of them are cozy mysteries at all, but they are kind of like, I feel like there is some sort of cozy sensibility in them. And do you have a definition of a cozy mystery, and would you consider Under Lock and Skeleton Key a cozy mystery?
Your second part, yes, I definitely consider it a cozy. I don't think cozy can be defined so narrowly that some people want to. I think in general that there needs to be an absence of graphic violence and language. I mean, there can be murders, but we're not coming across the scene and seeing the body parts and the blood and all that. The language tends to be much more PG or G rated. There can be romantic interests, but that's not the focus of the book, and that particular aspect of the relationship is not detailed in great length as it would be in a romance or any other genre. So, and the focus should be on the mystery, on the plot, on the puzzle, and you do that. So yeah, I think you're definitely in the cozy subgenre. I think you're helping to kind of make it a richer and more welcoming subgenre for readers and for writers. So I applaud you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think what I love about the books that you mentioned, what I look for as a reader, I'm attracted to a writer's voice. So I'm not necessarily, it can be different subgenres, but if I don't connect with them on that level, the book for me falls flat as a reader. And that's nothing against the author, it's not working for me. So it can be something completely different. Like we had Simone St. James recently do a virtual event for her book, The Book of Cold Cases, which is mystery, romance, horror, something you would not think someone like me who loves cozy mysteries would gravitate to, because yeah, it's pretty scary. But her voice is so strong, and you have that same unique, strong, distinctive voice that I think readers are just going to gravitate to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, in terms of voice, I was having a conversation with a bookseller yesterday that there was a book, I'm not going to name it, but I really, really loved it. And she did not. But in not loving it, she still is going to hand sell it to people who she thinks that is the right book for, because it is all about voice. And that book wasn't for her. And I loved it. And so she's like, yeah, it's a great book, but I didn't like it, you know? So, but like knowing who a book is for, and you won't always be right, but you know, I love that there are so many different voices that we don't all have to like all the books.
That's true. Before we run out of time, and I can't believe it's gone by so fast, can you tell us what's next for you as an author? Can we look for more adventures from Tempest?
Yes, I am thrilled to say that I recently turned in book 2 in the series to my editor at Minotaur Books, and I'm really, really excited about that one. Every book in the series is going to be a locked room mystery. And so I worked really hard on this one. And so I think it's even more of a puzzle. There is 1 murder and 4 impossibilities. A fake seance hides a very real crime. And so it's, I'm going all in for all of those elements that I love in reading fiction. And so I'm really excited about the new book, but I do hope it will be a long-running series, because I have many more ideas for Tempest and her friends and family. And I am also writing a short story with Tempest that I had an idea for that I'm excited about, which I need to find time to write, because I'm excited about it, because I also have the next Accidental Alchemist mystery, which I am revising. So lots of, and I have, those are the main things that I have going on right now, but I wish there were more hours on the day, because I have this long list of projects that I'm really excited for. But as we talked about earlier, figuring out the balance so that I don't burn out, but stay excited about working on projects. So, but I'm hoping to carve out some time for some additional projects too.
And for readers who want to learn more about your books, I'm sure you have a website.
Yes, gigipandian.com. And I am on social media, but kind of intermittently, because again, I try to focus on the writing and then pop online, but I also have an email newsletter. And so that's the best way. I try to, you know, give special things and recaps, and always keep newsletter subscribers up to date on everything, plus send things like more recipes and things, since there are recipes in the book and the website, but I send even more to subscribers, plus a free locked room mystery story. So that's on my website too, if folks are interested in signing up.
Well, I can't believe how quickly our time has gone by. You've just been an amazingly entertaining author. I want to thank you, Gigi, for being.
Well, thank you for the great questions and the invitation again, John. So. Yeah.
And I want to thank those for tuning in, for joining us, and stop by for another virtual author event at the Poison Pen. Thank you.